I'm going to take some time to go through some of the features of new Canvas quizzes. My experience has been that there are some really nice features to this, but also some quirks that are a bit of an annoyance, and I want to show some of those things and how you can work around them. So if you've already created a quiz, you can go back and edit it through quizzes, or if it happens to be in a module, all you have to do is click it there. If you want to create a new quiz, all you have to do is add a new Canvas quiz. Either way, if I go in and I select a quiz, or if I create a new one as a new Canvas quiz, I will come to this pane. All right, now if I've already created a quiz, there will be content in here. If I want to add content, I can do several things, but they all involve using this plus sign. If I want to add an individual question, I can choose from a whole host by clicking that plus sign and then clicking on the type. So say, for example, I want to add a multiple choice question. Now this sets up the pane. I'm going to add something totally inane here. I'm going to say, all right, what color are the leaves on most trees? And then I can type my answers in. Of course, I can type the correct answer, which would be green. And then I can type some distractors, such as yellow, blue, or red. Okay, really simple, really silly. All right, now, if I want to add to a bank, I should be able to click on this button, Add to Bank. Now I can do one of two things. I can create a new question bank in which to put this question, or I can add to an existing bank, which I'm going to do here because I've got a whole bunch. All right, I've got a long list of banks, and down at the bottom I have test pool, and that's where I'm going to put it. So the question now goes into that bank, but it's also saved. One thing you'll notice is if you've done this and you go to edit the question, you're told you have to edit it in the bank unless you want to change the point value. You do that by just clicking here and saying this is, say, worth 5 points, and then it's done. Okay, and that's not a global edit. One of the things that you'll notice is when you bank questions, the point values don't go with them. Okay, so that's one way to do it. Another way is to add questions directly in banks. Now here's a quirk that I discovered with this, and I've discussed it with others as well. The intuitive thing to do is to go up to the top here and say, well, I want to add questions to banks. Why not click here on item banks? Okay, that brings it up. The problem is there's no way to add questions here. You can see the questions that are in test banks, but you can't add anything, which makes this little button, in my mind, effectively useless. So here's the counterintuitive thing that you can do. If I want to add questions to banks and I want to do other things with question banks, the better thing to do is to go up here to the 3 dots in the upper right and click on Manage Item Banks. This brings up the question banks, and so if I go down to the test pool bank where I added this question, I can see that it's here. Okay, there it is. I can click on the new button and add a new question directly to this bank. That's something I couldn't do in the other pane. That's really strange and really annoying. But I can also do other things. I can move questions around in banks. The other thing I can do, which is useful for things like this, is say I want to create more multiple choice questions. One option I have is I can duplicate the question. All right, and if I duplicate the question, I can put it into the same bank or into a different one. So say I duplicate it here. All right, so now I have 2 questions that are the same. What color is the sky? I could go and I could edit this second question if I wanted to and change it. All right, so it's one way of doing this. If you want to create a pool of questions from which to draw, you could set up a template and then just duplicate the question and then change facets inside the question if you wish within the bank. Okay, now I can go to other banks as well. I can see up here I have a boiling point vapor pressure bank of questions, and it's a bunch of questions. They're all pretty much the same. They're small variances that I can go in and do. If I want to get out of banks, I hit return. That takes me back to the exam. Okay, so here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to delete this single question. Instead, what I'm going to do is I'm going to pool questions from that one bank, and then I'll pool questions from another. So if I want to do that, again, I have to add a question to the quiz. I go up to this piggy bank, and what that does is it takes me to the item banks. Now I'm in a specific bank right now. I can go back out to the banks by clicking on item banks. I'm going to go down to the pool that I created earlier. There are 4 questions in it. I could add a single question if I wanted to, just by clicking this plus sign. Or if I want to add a pool of questions, I click this all random button. Now, before I'm done with this, I'm going to go and do this for another one. So I'm going to go up to this freezing point question, do the same thing. Okay, so now at this point, I have actually a total of 12 questions in my quiz. That's silly. All right. Instead, what I want to do is I want to add one question from each of these pools. So I'll go to this first one and I click the edit button. Okay, now I have the option of using all the questions in that bank, or I can choose randomly selected questions. So say I want to choose 2 questions from this boiling point vapor pressure pool, and I want to make each question worth 5 points. That's done. And so now the first 2 questions come from that pool. I can go to the second question and say, well, I only want to pull 1 question from this pool, and again, I'll make it worth 5 points. And there we have it. So at this point, I have a quiz that has 3 questions total, 2 from the first pool and a 3rd from the second pool, each worth 5 points. So that's 15 points total. You see that here. You see the number of questions here. Now, if you want to see the quiz, you can do that by doing preview. A couple of other things you can do, though, is if you want to, first of all, go into the settings, and I strongly recommend this for multiple choice questions. Shuffle the answers. I also shuffle the questions. And I also do 1 question at a time, but I do allow backtracking. Now, there are all kinds of other options in here. Okay, you can put an access code on this quiz if you want the students to have a password before they go in. You can set a time limit. You can filter IP addresses, but here's the global allow calculator. And I always do this for chemistry quizzes, and I always allow a scientific calculator. You can allow multiple attempts if you want. And down at the bottom here, you can select what students can view when they're finished with a quiz. I would strongly recommend this as well, especially if you have students in large classes taking quizzes. Go through this and decide what you want students to be able to see when they're done. All right, so I always do this. And sometimes I'll go a little bit further. I'll say, well, I want to show the points possible. This is more detailed. Okay, I can say, all right, what's the students can see their response. If there's feedback associated with that, I can show that to students as well. Again, it depends on the nature of the quiz that I'm giving. All right, so now if I go back to the build section and I preview this, I'm going to see it exactly the way the student would. Okay, and so what happens here now is I'm seeing 1 question at a time. I'll see the instructions at the top, if there are any, and then here's a question. This was drawn from that top pool of vapor pressure boiling point, and I want to choose the substance from these structures that I think would have the highest vapor pressure at 20 degrees Celsius. It looks like it's this one, so I click anywhere there. Then I can move on to the next one. Now I'm going to choose the substance that I think has the lowest boiling point. Again, I can just click anywhere on that. And then, of course, I have this. And then I can submit. And this shows me how I did on this thing. Okay. There are lots of quirks with Canvas quizzes, and one of the other things that I would strongly recommend is do not copy a quiz from one course to another. You have the capability of doing that. There are several ways you can do it. None of them work well. Most of the time they don't work at all. When they do work, I've noticed other issues arise with grading and such that are incredibly painful. Instead, I know it's more work, but for each course, create a new quiz and draw questions from the pools. And that's one of the best reasons for using pools in the first place, is now you have those questions and you can draw them into other quizzes. The only thing you have to remember to do then is also to change the point values. I hope this was helpful.